Hi everyone, I'm really glad to be talking about digital curation today and an art historian perspective on it. And as you know, one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century is how to handle and take advantage of the massive and ever-growing amount of data. And cultural heritage institutions have been increasingly converting their collections into the digital space as the pressure towards digitization and open access rises. And by transitioning into the digital space, cultural heritage institutions have been facing challenges when it comes to data quality, long-term storage, and lifecycle management. The demand for openly accessible and interoperable data is growing fast. And so we have opportunities and challenges like data quality, long-term storage, accessibility, and also visibility and long-term interest in the data. When we transition into the digital space, significant and identity-forming objects are fragmented. So on the one hand, they lose properties such as smell, imminent proportions to the viewer, and physicality, but they also gain new possibilities like creating large networks of connections, and also for preservation and accessibility of the cultural heritage. That creates additional potential for research, and especially with regard to application of computer-aided methods. But as a basis, a clean and consistent databases must be developed and consistently continued, at best in accordance with sustainable guidelines such as the FAIR principles, so that the digitized collections can be found, accessed, interoperated, and be reused. So in knowledge management in particular, new structures are needed to create a sustainable and coherent databases that can be transferred into the digital world. And when we talk about data quality, then we can address the digital curation definition by the DCC, which involves maintaining, preserving, and adding value to digital research data throughout its life cycle, as well as reducing duplication efforts in research data creation. Curation enhances the long-term value of existing data by making it available for further high-quality research. So it addresses most of the technical issue on a bitstream level, starting in the conceptual phase with methods for digitization and storage options up to the end of life and termination of data. It secures access, permits preservation and reusability of data. So now I also want to emphasize the importance of controlled vocabulary. So when we are in the conceptualizing phase and the creation of the data, then we have to assign administrative, descriptive, structural, and technical metadata, and we have to plan how to create those digital objects. But when we look at cultural heritage institutions, they already have a knowledge management system in place. So we have to go a step back and look at digital literacy. So curators, art historians, all the staff needs to be made aware of how to input data consistently and how that will affect data. So there needs to be more of a perspective that they can also see their collection as data and the possibilities, because inconsistencies and mistakes can create huge outliers when visualizing data, and they're time consuming to adjust later on. So then we go on. For example, we heard a lot about this already, about controlled vocabulary. So it's really, when you actually work at those institutions, you often see that they abuse the labels, like they use words to describe things, and they use different places, and sometimes they even use free text fields instead of the correct input fields. So they need to be more made aware of a conscientious and consistent input, so they can create machine readable data, and then we can actually apply computational methods to it. So, for example, the VIKUS viewer is an open source project by the FH Potsdam, and then you can actually import your data set, and then they use the metadata to sort it by the years, for example, and they also use the metadata to create those word clouds up there, and also there's a possibility to search by similarity in the images, and so they rearrange them. And those are just some of computational methods that could be applied when we have clean data. And then So the data curation addresses the quality, long-term storage, and also accessibility when combined with FAIR principles and things like that. But they do not address visibility and long-term interest in the data. So the question is, in an analog world, so curators in art museums and galleries, they create meaning through curation. So it involves contextualization, linking objects and storytelling. And for long-term interest and visibilities, these methods should also be applied to cultural heritage and digital space, and not just in the physical collections. So projects that focus on storytelling are increasingly emerging, and there are a lot of examples, but here in Switzerland, they're still not standard practice. So when we look at a typical collection in Switzerland in the digital space, so these are public funded collections, they simply have digital versions of their analog catalog. So they allow access to their internal database with a simple filter and their images. And the users really need to know what they're searching for in order to find anything. And with the National Museum, they also have some categories you can browse through, but it's still not really a storytelling or not really an engaging, curated experience for the user. And so it needs to be reanalyzed and restructured to fit the new virtual form. And then the question is, how can we rethink a collection with all the possibilities of the virtual space? And how can we let the public create their own meaning and create engaging storytelling experiences? So when we go back to the art historian, curation, it stems from Latin and means to maintain, to take care of, and it involves storytelling, art mediation, but also involves the public. And the first use of the word can be traced back to ancient Rome, when Augustus placed someone in charge to look after the public works, such as cataloging and maintaining buildings. And from this time, the very early kinds of collection catalogs actually stem from. And the professionalization did not occur until the 19th century with the emergence and institutionalizing of public museums. So curating has a very long tradition, but the main aspects always stayed the same for maintaining, presenting, and mediating art or public works. So one international example, which is very famous, of course, is the Rijksmuseum. So it actually has a Creative Commons license, so the public can download in high resolution their own cultural heritage. They have access to it. They can freely reuse it, and it actually promoted that they would reuse it. There is audio tracks, and they can create their own public galleries and share them. And it's a very engaging experience, which was also very successful, of course. But there are also other ways that we could explore that are very successful in storytelling, which is, for example, computer games like Assassin's Creed, which also transport knowledge of cultural heritage, and it gives players a sense of familiarity with the sites. And it's a very rich and engaging experience. It's very successful, and it reaches a broad audience. So you could also apply some more experimental but very successful strategies from digital games to create an engaging experience. So the player here can actually climb onto Notre Dame and has a totally different view of it and a different experience with the object than he could have in the real world. And there's also another great example I want to show you, which is the computer game Never Alone. So the Inuit people, they decided they wanted to store their knowledge, their cultural heritage, and of all the options that they had, they decided to store it in a video game form. So they partnered with a game development team, and they created this game. The player is this girl, and so the player actually becomes one of them, and I can actually really engage with the cultural heritage. They take the objects in their hand, they search for things, and there's also always input from documentary scenes where we can actually see the people talk about their cultural heritage. So it combines this storytelling experience when you play the game, but there are also some documentary scenes which are really also very interesting and engaging. And this is a very successful way also to transport cultural heritage. So So, in conclusions, curators and institutions need to be more aware and conscientious to see their collection also as data to prepare for machine readability and usability. They also need to be more strongly involved in maintaining curation storytelling in the digital space to transport meaning, also to drive engagement and to stay visible in this huge ocean of data. And before even digitizing collections, there needs to be a strategy and not just dump the data out into the world. So this inevitably raises the question of the museum's guidelines and mission statements, since this should define how the respective data is handled. So do they see themselves as a keeper of the public's cultural heritage, so the collection should be visible and accessible to the public as widely as possible, or rather as a mediator of very strongly curated and selected knowledge? And these two strategies are neither unique nor mutually exclusive, but they merely show that it is of central importance that the institutions are aware of their mission to the public in order to ensure a consistent and logical presentation of their collection, whether in physical or digital space. So an evaluation of the internal objectives is necessary in order to be able to correspond to the values of the institution in the digital realm as well. Here are my references, and I thank you for your attention.
So, hello, Beatrice. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Very good, very good. The technology is on our side. So, thank you so much for your presentation. And at the moment, we do not have any questions online in the workshop environment. But if anybody has any questions here in the audience, then please go ahead. You can ask or comment at the moment. So, I can't see any hands raised. Any questions? Any thoughts? I have a small question of my own, actually. Recently, not very long time ago, I was actually engaged in a small discussion about the role of a curator or the role of an art historian as a curator. And the problem seemed to be that there are different kind of developments in this field. I mean, I'm not working as a curator myself, but it was, well, reflected to me. So the problem was that this kind of traditional curator, let's say art historian, can't always do this kind of very, very deeply specialized job, but this person has to be like very generic information specialist. As a art historian yourself, is it so? Can you comment this kind of situation, maybe?
Yes, so usually in institutions, the curators are split into time sectors, so they cover a couple of centuries. So these are their fields of specialty, and it's also their job to curate it, but also to research and publish on that part of the collection. But it is always a huge part. Like, they do have specialties, of course, but there's, in any century, there's so much pieces of art. And what's also interesting is that, like, 95% of the art is stored in the depot, so it's not visible in the collections, and only like 5 to 3% is actually visible in the physical walls of the institution and can actually be exhibited. So it's really cool that in the digital space you could actually use this unlimited space to show all of the collections instead of just that which fits the physical walls. But then you also have to curate it. Yes. Mm-hmm. You cannot just dump it out. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. So now in workshop we have a question arrived. So the question, is there a paper already published where we can find more about this amazing research?
Not yet, but I'm still working on it. So it's part of my PhD thesis that I'm still working on.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you. So, any more questions? Any more comments? Aha, I see here Mika wants to ask a question. So just a second while the microphone is arriving. By the way, how is weather in Basel these days?
Oh, it's raining really strongly right now.
Such a shame. In Tallinn we have such a nice weather. Yesterday evening the sea was so like a mirror, really. And today also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but now the microphone has also arrived. So please
Yes, I just have a comment as you spoke about curation. In the two-tier architecture I mentioned in my own presentation, the bottom layer is formed by something I call a virtual collection. And it is formed of data from different institutions. And someone has to bring together this data. And it's not really a technical effort, but you need a curator to form this virtual collection. And as an example of a virtual collection could be the cultural heritage of the Ladakh region in Western Himalayas. That region has museum objects in different collections in different parts of the world, and it would be very valuable if these could be brought together. And bringing these together in a digital format, that forms a virtual collection. But there needs to be a curator who does that. And that's different from the curator of the original collection. So the digital world presents all these kinds of challenges. I just wanted to comment this as a...
Yes. Yeah, we actually have one project where there is a collection that has also been distributed in a lot of different museums, and there's an ongoing digitizing project where we want to kind of get it back together, at least in the digital space. But then there's also the question, how do we present it? It used to be in one house. It's like a Wunderkabinett, so it's very curious objects from the 19th century. And then there's the question if you want to restore like the house and in a virtual way, when you enter the house, that you can see all the objects, how they were originally presented, or if you want to show it more in a modern view. But it's really cool that you can now bring all these pieces back together and have this experience to show to the public.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you so much for this comment. And here, if anybody doesn't have any more questions, then a small comment has also arrived to workshop. And I think you, as a doctoral student, you probably need this kind of encouragement. So I will read it also to others as well. So it was great hearing about the importance of consistency and controlled vocabulary. This is something we talk about a lot at the Chester Beatty, Dublin, and it's good to hear it from our fellow institutions. So thank you. So that was a small encouraging comment as well to you, Beatrice.
Thank you.
But if we don't have any more questions and comments at this point, then let's wish Beatrice a good weather to Basel, and hope you can also follow us here in Tallinn during the other days of conference as well. And let's give another applause to Beatrice for this marvelous presentation.